Well, this fellow that you see beside me here is very well known to Londoners, as is the group that he's associated with. But this is Will Heeman. Now, Heeman is part of Heeman Farms, who is just a phenomenal organization. And I'm not trying to butter you up, Will, but I mean, you've been so essential to so many different things in the city. And for reasons that I want to talk about in a bit, it seems to me you're kind of at the intersection of all these different debates that people are having around food and food security. Hemans is right in the center of that, showing what can be done. So I think that's important. But before we get into that stuff, thank you for coming on today. That's great. But you are the chief daymaker for Hemans, an
Yeah.
interesting title. What does that mean?
So it means that I work in a family business, and when you're in a family business, you can basically make your title whatever you want. But what we found was really important at our place was that we wanted to create an experience when people come out here that when they leave, they're happier than when they first got here because nobody is making you come and buy plants or buy some fresh strawberries. So it's definitely something we wanted to put in the title for all of our staff. So they knew exactly what they were here to do, which was make our guest stay better. And so I get to be the chief day maker. So it's a fun thing. But yeah, it's something that we kind of wanted to put right in the title so everyone when they worked or when they were coming out to visit, they knew exactly what our goal was.
Yeah. Yep, I've been part of that. I've been out there before, along with Jane and our kids from Sudan. It was a great
Yeah.
education. But I think too, when you go to the Heman's website and you look at it, almost every person there is named Heman in their last names, right? Like it really is a family operation, and it's been like that since the '60s, if I remember correctly. Can
Yeah.
you just go over quickly what that history is for me?
Yeah. So today, we're at the farm that my grandparents emigrated to when they emigrated from Holland, they moved around a little bit and then they ended up settling back in London. It was the first place they were meant to come to, and then they really called to them. So after a few years of moving around, they started off in Canada in 1958, and they bought the farm that we're on today in 1963.
Hmm.
And fun fact, it was actually their honeymoon to come to Canada. And so my grandparents were dating at the time, and a ticket salesperson in Holland came to my grandparents' place or my grandfather's place trying to find his brother to get him a ticket. And he's like, "Oh, brother's not there." So he's like, "Anyone else want a ticket?" And my grandfather's like, "Maybe, where are you going?" So he bought two tickets, asked my grandmother to marry him. They moved to Canada. They bought the farm we're on today, which had a it was 25-acre farm, and there was a cow and a half-acre patch of strawberries, and so that's how humans got into the strawberry business. And it was touch and go because Dutch people, it's either dairy farms or greenhouses, the joke goes. But my grandmother grew up in Alsmere, which is famous for having the flower clock. She grew up on a carnation farm,
Hmm.
and so she kept pestering my grandfather to say we should put up some greenhouses, and my grandfather's smart enough to listen to his wife, and so we put up some greenhouses, and kind of from there we started off into the greenhouse world, but always having those strawberries and that farming roots with that. So as you fast forward now, Humans is on the second and third generation on the farm. So there's about eight of us that are here, and then there's four humans in the fourth generation that are around as well. And so we kind of have grown from those humble roots. And so even today, as you said on the website, we believe that, like, if you're saying that you're a family farm, you're a family business, and you're supporting local, and that means something that we don't want to be shy in hiding the fact that there is still a large number of family that are working here at Heman's, and that you can see the family that you're purchasing from. We like to say that you can shake the hand that feeds you, because at the end of the day, we are very present on the farm and around the greenhouse. And so, yeah, we think that that's just very special for us to be able to have that connection. And also, frankly, for a lot of people who come up to humans, maybe like your kids when you're coming out, there's not as many opportunities for people to interact with the farmer or to go directly to the farm where they're buying their produce. And that's something that we think is important as people. The world is getting smaller all the time, but yet certain connections are getting further, really. When you go into the grocery store and everything is always available, understanding what went into actually growing that food to get it to the grocery store before you could get it to to your home. There's a great story behind that. There's a lot of hard work that goes behind that. So, we're here to, at least when it comes to talking about the produce that we grow and that we offer, we want to ensure that our guests understand that.
Yeah. And I do want to talk a bit about that, 'cause I write for the Free Press, but all summer I've been doing a series on food and local food and what that means. But we'll get into that shortly. But I remember, I think it was back in the spring, maybe. Heeman, no, it was, I can't remember. Anyway, you folks came in with a truck full of strawberries. And
Yeah.
our volunteers went crazy, right? They just thought this was such a great donation. So I put it out there on social media, on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And bang, the next thing I knew, hundreds of people had liked it or responded to it. And that had nothing to do with me. I mean, people never respond in those numbers to me. And I realized it was that Heeman's has a great social media presence. And in speaking with one of your relatives not too long ago, they said that's Will. That's really what Will is good at. But it seems to me that you have intentionally taken your operation and put it out there on social media so people can better understand it. Is that true? And also, is it pretty time consuming for you if you are the one that mainly does it?
So it is true. It kind of came about very early on. So when we started on the different social media platforms as early as about 2011, 2009, and 2008, like depending on which one you're looking at. So at the time I was in university, and when you start on something, we wanted to make sure that we were doing it and focusing on it well. And so, it was funny at the time, I decided that we were going to do social media over really building up like a newsletter,
Mm-hmm.
which we have now, but like it was kind of funny to watch the progression of when we were first starting. My grandfather was like, "What are you doing, like messing around with this like Facebook thing?" And then a few years later, it was like, "Hey, can you put this on Facebook?" So it's always changing, as everyone who's on social media can kind of understand. But one of the things that we found was really helpful with it was that it was a way for us to kind of, for me specifically, to highlight some of the stories and some of the things that we were doing, that my family members were doing, because Heman's has been around for, next year is going to be our 60th anniversary. So we've been around for a long time. And we've been doing a lot of those things, but one of the things that social media was really good at was allowing us to be able to connect directly with our community members and explain what we were doing and the process that was going into it. And it was something that people really resonated with. And today, yeah, it's definitely a lot of work, but so I'm still very involved in doing that and setting the direction. And people, might see some of the videos that we put out, that I put out, but there's a couple people that work behind the scenes helping me with that, along with a few other things these days, because between humans getting a little bit bigger and into different things, and also me having a couple of kids now that also want to have my attention, it's good to have some help, just to have a little bit of a balance between all the things that anyone who's on social media on a regular basis would understand. It can be time consuming, especially one of the things that I love about it is that people really interact, as you mentioned, with like the interactions that people would have, but like people have questions. I mean, the thing that is most amazing right now about being what or where we are in our industry is that people have a passion for local food, they have a passion for gardening, they have a passion for growing their own food, but they lack the knowledge. And so that's where we are kind of there to bridge that gap, and maybe hopefully help them to avoid some of the mistakes that we've made along the way. And so the number of people that are sending us direct messages and photos and questions and stuff like that, it's one person's part-time job, 12 months of the year, just to kind of go through and facilitate and like answer all those. But it's great because then people don't have to learn the hard way. If we can help them avoid that, I mean, that's great. It can be a lot of fun, as you guys know, setting up the community garden at the food bank. It can be a very worthwhile pursuit, and you can have education, you can create a great amount of food, but it can also be a tremendous amount of work and frustrating if you're not aware of the things that you maybe should be. So that's how we like to think that we're going to try to make social media that good side of things where you can actually connect and make a positive difference and be that good news story maybe in the feed that day.
Well, whenever I'm down at the food bank and a Heeman truck pulls in, I always think of the Beatles song "Strawberry Fields Forever" because you guys come down on a regular basis. The strawberries are a special delight, not just to the volunteers when they see them, but to the clients. Like we're now helping 10,000 people a month.
Wow.
That's over 4,000 families. That's record. I've been there since the beginning, so that was 36 years ago. We've never been close to that.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening, is you try to get as much food in as you can do it, but when it's during the summer, often donations drop off a bit. And now,
Yeah.
especially, I think with, just this perfect storm of rental costs and gas prices and inflation, all the price of food, all of these things, it's making it more difficult for people to donate. But I think when our clients see these strawberries come in, it is like it was when we were kids and we went to Dairy Queen or
Yeah.
whatever it is. I mean, it is a special delight. It's not only wholesome food, but it's also the kind of food that is difficult at times for us to acquire or to get.
Yeah.
New folks have really come through. But I did want to talk to you, and I want to thank you for that, Will. That has meant a lot to us emotionally.
Oh,
It's been a
yeah.
great partnership for years, and we
Yeah.
really appreciate it. So extend our thanks to your whole family for that. But I do want to talk a bit about, I think, one of the things we discovered in London was when we tried to go with a greenhouse, we ended up building it. It was with John Fleming, who used to be the head of planning for the city. He had retired.
Yeah.
Louise, we hired as our full time greenhouse guy, and myself. And so we put up this greenhouse with the help of other groups. And it was great. But we suddenly found out that you weren't allowed to have it. There were certain zoning restrictions that did not allow a rural building in an urban setting. So we went ahead with it. We met with the city and we said, but what it really taught me was London has got a long way to go in order to access grow local. Like I know we have community gardens, we have plant a row, grow a row. I know people grow in their gardens, but when you look at it more institutionally or on a broader base, we have a long way to go, I think, around urban agriculture in London in what can be done. And then all somebody has to do is go to Heeman's and their heads just explode, right? Like it's just these are the possibilities are there. You've got all these greenhouses long before we ever had them. You've
Yeah.
turned it into an art, but you've also turned it into an art that's kind of a consumable art. And by that, I mean it gets to kids, it gets to parents, it gets to grandparents. It's a remarkable thing. But my sense is that London has turned that corner. And my sense also is that people are more and more wanting to grow, not only grow local, but to source local food in order to acquire it. Now, that's my
Yeah.
sense in London. How is it out at Heeman's? Do you have that sense as well?
Yeah, I think that like especially in the last 15 years and then when the pandemic happened, it just took it up a notch where people are interested in that and we've seen I would say like a shift just in mindset because for the longest time when I was a very young kid, people would come out and they would go pick their own fruit, and there would be this like sense of we're going to go out to the farm and we're going to get our produce while it's fresh and in season, and we're going to load up. We're going to make all the things. We're going to make the jams. We're going to freeze them down. We're going to do all that, and then through the 90s and early 2000s, that kind of sense shifted and people were just it was just well how much is it and the local factor was not as important as it's in the grocery stores all the time and then and later in the 2000s that's when people's mindset started to shift a little bit to understanding the importance of the local food system and sourcing local and I think that's just really been amplified through the last decade especially but it is uh, it's a challenge to work with some people just in terms of explaining what it means to be local and seasonal because we have people who I was saying earlier their passion is for local but they'll come in February through a snowstorm and come in and want to buy or go pick strawberries and we explaining why you can go to the grocery store and get strawberries but you can't get them local here at that time is still there's those like bridges that we still have to always like connect with. And as we have less farms, when that becomes more challenging because there's less people explaining that, and to be able to kind of share that story. But when I was a kid, there was a local food map, and that would be on my parents' office, and it had all the local strawberry farms, and there was 17 of them. And today there's, I think, like three. So um, there's definitely been a shift in terms of just how and where people can go to get that local food. So and to your point, our here in the London community, there's not as many places to go to get that, and there can be a lot of restrictions. Which, if you never were interested in putting up a greenhouse in the city, you might not understand the ramifications of putting up a non-commercial building in the city. But it doesn't mean that those kind of ideas aren't worthwhile. It just means that we just have a longer way to go to make sure that those kind of things can be done. And here at Humans, our goal is kind of to be like a duck. We have a lot of things that we're doing, and we want to make it look like it's graceful, and we're just floating along, and we just got it all figured out. But underneath, we are just like paddling, trying to go from one thing to the next. So I think, like everyone, some of us are just better at hiding our fluttering than others. So but it's
Yeah.
a struggle no matter whether you have 10 plants or 10 acres or more. Growing food, and it can be a challenge, and then on top of all the other things that we have in society today. So yeah, at least we have the passion, but we have a long way to go in terms of making it a little bit more accessible than it is today.
Yep. It is my sense that there's a great irony going on. I wrote in the Free Press last weekend about how, we've lost 600,000 acres of farmland since 2016. We lose 519 acres a day in Ontario. That, like, that's going on. And there are the large farms that are thriving and doing really well, but 90% of their stuff goes overseas, right? So what we've got here is what looks like a booming kind of agriculture or farming industry. There's really a few that are highly successful, and we're thankful for that. But at the time when people are moving towards, partly because of the pandemic, but are moving towards, I want local. I want to be able to source. I want to know where my food is coming from, and I want to know what's in it.
Yeah.
Pesticides or the additives, those kind of things. So that is happening at the same time is that there's this gap happening in our farmland in Ontario where there are fewer and fewer farms.
Yeah.
So it's hard to know how you can link this demand that citizens and others organizations have for local procured food when the farms aren't able to keep up with that kind of demand because they're closing down. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, it's funny because as you were saying that, I was just reminded of a conversation I was having recently about that, where and I don't really know the answer to that, because the reality is that everyone wants to have fresh local food that is accessible and affordable, right? We want to make sure that local food is affordable, and in certain communities, especially around the GTA, and even here in London, the land that farmers are growing on is worth more to put condos and houses on than it is to keep it in food. And so it's a really fine balancing act, because you're trying to make sure that your food is affordable, but then if we make it more expensive, maybe some of those farms would have been more valuable to keep as a farm. But I mean, the it's not a really funny joke, but the city hasn't really grown to the East End in my father's lifetime, and because of the airport. And so, we're I think we are fortunate that way, and maybe the communities too, that like the city has not come this way at all. And we have so we've been able to continue to grow our farming operation this way, because if we were going north or west or even south, like um the city would have come for our farmland like a long time ago. And it is a challenge to make it so that farms and developers aren't pressing for more of that farmland, because in the London area there's a lot of great farms, but not all of them. Most of them are not growing something that you would recognizably put on your plate. It's not like you're going to go and
Yeah.
get corn and be like, oh, I'm going to put field corn on my plate. You have to go to Niagara and Norfolk, and even in those areas, there's a lot of pressure in that Niagara area for that. But so we have a lot of great farmland in Ontario. It's just that here in London, it's not a lot of it is being used to grow fruits and vegetables that people would normally recognize, and then those areas where we are pulling from, there's a lot of that pressure, and I don't know. I
Mm.
don't know how to fix it. I know exactly, I can understand why we would want to keep that land and why I think that it's important. But some of these farmers, the pressure that they're getting to sell, even when they hold out, you hear about stories about how some of the neighbors that move in don't appreciate having a farmer next door because the equipment is loud, or because they're running a farming operation now in like a residential area, and that it's
Yep.
it's a challenge. I don't
Yeah.
know what to say.
I know. It's a bit difficult. It's becoming a bit more clearer to me, though. Like, I've been at this 36 years. I don't have the knowledge about growing food that you do for sure. But, for years and years and years, the food bank got by with non-perishable food items,
Right.
right? That's because it was a collection system, basically.
Yeah.
And, people dropped food off at fire halls or at grocery stores. That was there were bins there and at other locations as well. But it was easiest to do that because that food could be preserved easier, for one
Yeah.
thing. But also, if somebody wanted to donate celery or oranges or something like that and put it in the bin at a grocery store, we might not be able to get it for 2 or 3 days because it was so
Yeah.
busy. And also, we might not have had the walk in cooler space to be able to house a lot of that stuff. But the thing that changed all of that was not our vision as a food bank. It wasn't me or Jane. The thing that changed it all is we were hearing more and more from people that I want to donate fresh food. And
Yeah.
there was a consciousness that was not there, I would say, for the first 20 years. I don't doubt that people always knew that fresh food was better, but I think they were living in the grocery store system and all of that and the way that it worked, right? But then
Yeah.
they began to press us and began to ask us, can you do more? So 10 years ago, we were at roughly 20% of the food that we gave out was perishable or
Okay.
fresh, right? Now it's 54%.
Wow.
That's massive. Now, a lot of that though, it's not due to the food bank being visionary. It's due to the public pressing for a couple of reasons. One, people had the knowledge that this kind of food is better and I want to donate it. Can you
Right.
accommodate it? So we had to
Yeah.
make changes to do that, which is only right. But also, why would you want to give people of low income or people who are on the margins secondhand food or perishable food? Like, they need just as good as the rest of us get. And we heard that as a food bank. The problem was we were just so busy. And so we thought, well, what we'll do is we'll open it up and see what happens. So we did a
Yeah.
couple of initiatives and we got swamped. We got swamped with perishable items to the point where it is today. And then when I announced the greenhouse, I'd never planted a thing in my life, right? But I announced it on CBC, and all the public just all came in on that and supported. We didn't have to pay for anything. There were so many donations out there to make a go of it. That's a long story. I'm sorry, Will. But I think what
Oh,
I'm trying to say is I think the public, in many ways, has been there longer than we have.
yeah.
Food industry always goes ahead on the basis of economics. And it's
Mhm.
probably also true that a lot of those people who really wanted to donate fresh food also really appreciated being able to go in February and get strawberries from someplace at a grocery store. So
Yeah.
there was a lot of changes that had to be made. But it is my sense, even from what you're saying, that there is a very strong consciousness now from just average citizens and organizations that they want to go fresh and they want to go local. And the system, including food banks, the
Yeah.
system is trying its best to accommodate that. But
Yeah.
in that sweet spot in the middle is Heeman's, right?
Mhm.
Like Heeman's, it just seems to me that you folks have, it's not just that you make food available and high quality food, it's the fact that you get out there on the airwaves and the highways and byways and say that there are options. And
Right.
I presume that's part of your intention as to why you operate, correct?
Yeah, it is. And I have to say, when we talk about how many years we've been going back, our relationship with the food bank all started because Josh had reached out about setting up or bringing in gleaners, and so we're like, okay. And that was when you guys were first starting out. You get volunteers come out and pick, and we did that, and we saw that, and and we are like, this is great. It was awesome to see the volunteers out, but I think there was like maybe 10, and half of them were Josh's family. And
Go figure. That's right. Yep.
yeah, and we're like, you know, and maybe this is just our mindset, but we're like, we can do this better. And if we're like going to try to make an impact, I mean, our approach was with our pickers. If we just said, when we're done picking, if we still have some fruit in the field, if we can just say, go pick 800 pounds or 1,000 pounds or whatever you guys say you can take that day, and we'll just go out and pick that. As
Right.
long as, and our pickers are pros, they can get that done really quickly, and we can have a much bigger impact. That just it just made sense, and then we can make sure that our fields are kind of caught up. And we always talk about, you know, the clients that you have in the food bank and the agencies that you guys work with, those people are in a temporary spot by and large. There's not everyone who's like, for the rest of my life, I'm going to be going to the food bank every week to get my meal. So we just look at it as a temporary, it's a temporary stop in their life because of all the reasons that you were listing up before, especially now about how expensive everything is. But you know, it's not a handout, it's a hand up. And we always look at it as a temporary, like it's an opportunity where maybe when they're back on their feet, or they're not going to be a client of the food bank, they'll come out to Heeman's to get some of that local food. But in the interim, I think that it's wonderful to be able to kind of see that shift, because when you were telling me about that, it sounds just like any business where it's like, I really need you to grow this kind of tomato. When people come into the greenhouse and we're like, we have 36 kinds of tomatoes. They're like, yes, but I really like this one. And if enough people ask for it, you're like, by gosh, we should really look into that, because, like a lot of people ask about it. And that's the only way that you kind of, there's a certain way where, you and Jane might look at the food bank and say, this is what we think we need to, this is the direction we need to go on based on what we're seeing. But then you'd be foolish not to listen to what your clients are telling you, because that's where your best ideas come, is from like your clients. And whether it's a nonprofit or, like a for-profit family business like ours, that's where, we just see that. And I think that it's great, but it's a huge challenge. I feel like in that beautiful statement that you had, you kind of wax over just how challenging it is to make a system that was built on something that maybe you had a few days or a week to pick up. And now it's like,
Yeah.
we call them, we're like, hey, we got some strawberries, and you need to pick them up in like 4 hours,
Yeah.
because they're fresh picked today, and like they're not going to get any fresher. And that is a huge shift that we have been working through together, both producer and you guys on the food bank side. But it's a ballet that, and not everyone, like, when it works, it's beautiful. But it is a huge shift for both industries to kind of come together to be able to make sure that that fresh produce is getting delivered, and that it's still fresh when it gets to the clients.
Yeah. Well, Will, I was a firefighter for 30 years. Jane graduated from Western in zoology. So basically, we had no knowledge of this kind of stuff. And we felt we've been over our heads many times. But in recent years, it's been very clear to us just how much the public wants these kind of changes. But when you move into it, you have to know that there's people there that understand and can help, and to help supply. And that's what you folks have done. We're out of time, but I really want to say that when we try to think of what would this look like, Heeman's is always the default thing that we come back to. You folks, it's not just about the food, it's the way that you communicate about it, the way you make it family oriented, accessible, approachable. It's an ecosystem. And it's a beautiful ecosystem that you folks have developed, and we have benefited from the food bank. I just want to thank you for that. And we should have more discussions, Will, because you're an encyclopedia of information, whereas we're still learning. But I really appreciate all the help you've given, and for you doing this today.
Well, we very much, as we've talked about off air, we very much appreciate the service that the food bank provides, and we are grateful to be a partner, to be able to help in a small way to deliver on that mission for your
Yeah.
clients. So it's a pleasure to talk with you, and yeah, we'll look forward to continuing the education, the communication online and at the farm, if anyone wants to come out. But thank you so much for what you guys are doing, and for having me on. It's
Yeah,
been a blast.
that's great. Will, thank you.